Already for quite a few years, we have been in what I would call a governance transition at all levels, global, regional, national. We are living a transition of multilateralism. A lot of people talk about a crisis of multilateralism. I don't believe so. I think we really are in a transition. And a transition from what has for many decades been, and for more than that, for many centuries actually, been a state-centric governance system that has managed the affairs of our planet, to a much more multi-stakeholder, polycentric, if you want, system that we're not there yet. It's in the process, and I'll come back to that in a moment. This new end game, if you want, or the end state, is going to be hopefully something that is more collaborative, that is more integrated, that is de-siloed, and that is very much more networked. And it's happening as we talk. It's happening particularly here in the city of Geneva, where you have basically the operational center of the international system with an extraordinary number of different actors, including international organizations, who are working away on trying to change the way that we work, and more importantly, change the way that we work together. This is happening at a time of really rapid and very deep technological advances. And it's also happening at a time when we are confronted with massive existential challenges: climate, migration, and all the other issues that we all know, whether it's financial issues, whether it's health issues, the ones that we're living right now. We have more than enough of them, and they are giving us challenges that we have a hard time dealing with. But the system that we have built up has a hard time dealing with. I want to remind you, though, that the multilateral system that was created after Second World War on the basis of what was created at the time of the League of Nations has brought to humanity a level of peace and rights and well-being that we have never, as a human race, experienced before. And I always highlight this because we tend to forget it, and we tend to forget the fact, the extraordinary advances that we have brought about in the last several decades, both in terms of decrease of poverty, decrease of mortality, decrease of wars, increase of education, etc. So the list is really long, and when you look at the numbers, it's an impressive achievement by humanity over the past 70 years, 75 years, in spite of what you read on the front pages of your newspapers. So this is the context, and I mentioned the last part, not just because we need to be reminded of it, it's often because it is an inspiration and a basis on which we have to think about how to move forward. Now, the need for change and the need for reform and the need for completely redoing the way that we do our business, if we want to have a planet that is fit to live for your children and their children, we have to change. And I think that COVID, more than anything, the last few years has shown really in very glaring terms the imperative need to accelerate the move towards a new kind of multilateralism. The catastrophic results of a lack of coordination and consultation at all levels has been exactly that, catastrophic, with results, with negative results, that had we been better at working together, at consulting with each other across the globe, even within countries, within regions, plenty of examples of that. All we have to talk about and look at is maybe the way that Europe has dealt with this, or even countries like the one I'm in right now, where you have 26 cantons, all of which are doing their own thing without really, at this stage right now, collaborating on how to do about and having uniform rules of how people are supposed to behave. The result is an increase, a catastrophic increase in numbers. Anyway, this result of coordination at all levels has been a wake-up call. It has had massive effects on global health at all levels, not just those that are occasioned by COVID itself, but also on a number of others, as hospitals have been closed for treatment to people who have other illnesses, etc. Hundreds of thousands of unnecessary deaths have occurred across the globe, and this is really not acceptable. We're looking at what some people now are calling vaccine nationalism. That's a side effect of this do-it-yourself and go-for-yourself attitude to addressing this issue. I heard, I think on the radio yesterday, that the richest countries on our planet have by now bought enough vaccines to cover 3 times their inhabitants, which gets us straight to one of the other problems that we have created, which is the risk of the South and the poor countries being left behind, in spite of efforts of like COVAX by the WHO and others, and also efforts by NGOs and philanthropic organizations. And there's plenty of other negative effects, but I think I've made my point on this one, and particularly on what it has done to global health. One of the consequences of COVID, and that we are living and about to live in an even more catastrophic way, is the economic and financial consequences that, again, also will be greater than necessary because of inadequate or no coordination among member states, among countries around the world. And this brings us back, for example, to 2008, when we had a financial crisis, where the world actually got together and somehow took collective action that minimized the impact of the 2008 financial meltdown. What we are understanding through all this today, and I think that is an important element to point to, is the fact that the conflation between local and global is even better understood today. There is no longer such a thing as a global problem or a local problem. These two things are one and the same and feed on each other. The other thing that is a very important element, a very impactful element, is the way that technology has leapfrogged at least 10 years into our lives over the past 9 months. We have all lived it, and we are living it right now with this conference, where the way we live, the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we shop, the way we deal with our doctors, the way we deal with our banks, the way we deal with all sorts of daily goings about has changed irrevocably. And many of them will stay, even when we're back to some normality and some less constraining situation because of COVID. It has also pointed out to us the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals as a global roadmap, and it has made it even clearer to us than it was before. The fact that we have this extraordinary document that was signed 5 years ago by all member states that really has become the leading, as I said, roadmap for the world on how to move forward on making sure that we have a sustainable planet to live in for decades to come. So where are we going with all this, and how are we going to make sure that we transform this crisis to an opportunity? Every crisis is an opportunity, as many people say, and this one is one too. How do we ensure that we can move forward in a way that we will manage our planet to ensure a sustainable future? So I already mentioned at the beginning, I think that one of the things that we have learned is the imperative, if there ever was a doubt about it, of figuring out a way of working together in ways that we have never worked together before. We have to create a new multilateral system, or we have to reform or rebuild the one that we have now that quite clearly is not able to face the existential problems that we're faced with no longer. If you can call it a new multilateral system, or you can call it a new global solidarity. For me, it's one and the same. It means that we have to reform the UN and its partner structures. We have a 75-year-old system that has done wonders for the world, but there's no longer able to really deal with these problems in a way that makes sense. This is the fate of many bureaucracies. They become sclerotic, they become inward-looking, they fear change. It's difficult for them to adapt and to reform, but it has to happen. And many of them, if they don't, they're not able to change, will probably close over the next 10, 15 years, and others will take their place. The fact is, in my point of view, that the way we manage the affairs of our planet and the way we do our decision-making is going to look increasingly different than what it is today. The decision-making table is going to look differently. Around it will be sitting, governance will still be there, but they will not be the only actors that will sit there. We'll have representatives from business, civil society, academia, religious communities, youth, very important, and I'll come back to that in a moment. The interesting part of it, and that comes back to what I was saying before about what we have achieved over the past 75 years, is that we do have the tools, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, we have the human and financial capital. We understand the roots of the problems and of the big existential problems. We also know what the solutions are. What we need is more will. Now, for many years, when you have these discussions, everybody says, well, we need some more political will. But actually, I don't think that that's going to be enough. If there's one thing that I'm completely sure of, is that if we all here in this room today sit back and expect our governments to deal with the problems and solve them, we're going to be sitting around for a long time. It is simply not going to happen anymore. Our governments are incapable, either together, perhaps better collectively, but they are finding a hard time to do so, to solve the big ticket items. It has to be a collaborative effort by a whole suite of different actors together with government. So around that table, as I said, we'll have business, we'll have civil society, academia, religious communities, youth, etc., the press. I think that the one message that I want to pass on to here and to press is that we all have a responsibility to do this. And if one group of our society has more responsibility than others in many ways, it's you, your age group, your colleagues and friends, co-students, etc., because you are the ones who are going to have to deal with the mess that we're leaving you. And you're the ones who are going to be the ones that are going to use the new technologies that are going to be put at our disposal. Many of them are going to be used for the good, but some of them have to be managed so that they don't get used for the bad, in a sense. The problem is that things are not moving fast enough, certainly not yet. Both our government structures and our international organization structures, human beings in general, have a hard time to adapt to these kind of changes, kind of rapid change. And again, here, if we are going to adapt with the speed that is required, as far as I can see, the only way we do it is if we work together. As again, I said, at different levels. So this is not to say that things are not happening. There are plenty of stuff and plenty of initiatives that are happening, again, at all levels. And certainly both in the North and the South. I worked a lot on the SDGs, for example, and when I was in office in the UN. And one of the things that always struck me when I was looking at who was implementing, who were the smartest ideas, and who were the ones who were implementing the SDG goals the fastest and the most collaborative way in different countries around the world. And almost without exception, it was the countries, and it is the countries in the South. All of the incredible initiatives and insights that we collected and then shared with others, in most cases, came from the South. So there's, again, this is not to say that things are not happening in the North as well, and I'm going to give you an example right now that I'm involved with myself, that encompasses this idea that we have to bring together communities that haven't worked before, and to sit them down around the table to sort of get their act together, agree on the way forward, and then start implementing it. So what I'm talking about to you now is what Jean-François alluded to before. I'm the chairman of one part of something called the Geneva Science and Technology Anticipator. And this is a new foundation that was created about a year ago by the Swiss government and the government of Geneva to go and scan the cutting edge science that is cooking in the labs all over the world, and that will bring results over the next 5, 10 to 25 years. Things that are going to be part of our world over the next couple of decades. And then bring the scientists who are working on these things together with what we call the diplomacy actors. These are not just diplomats, but people who work in NGOs, in UN organizations, who basically are the ones who implement the mandates and the projects and programs that are aimed at helping those most in need get a better life. And this is bringing together communities, as I said, that normally don't speak, and bringing the two communities plus others together around this table to ensure that this cutting-edge science will serve humanity. It's a fact that breakthrough science and future technological discoveries that are being cooked on now will reshape how we view ourselves as humans in the future, how we relate to each other in society, how we care for our environment. And to really look at what kind of tools we can shape in order to do that, we now have about 100 scientists working away on several issues divided up in 4 platforms. One is quantum revolution and advanced artificial intelligence. One is eco-regeneration and geoengineering. The third one is human augmentation. And the fourth is science and diplomacy. Again, these are, and there's a whole series of different papers that are being worked on now. These are issues that will come to the fore over the next 25 years. The added advantage of this process, and sometimes when I'm asked what I'm doing and what JESDA is doing, in order to make it as simple as possible, I tell them that we're a mixture between a dating agency and a translation agency. We bring people together that never spoke to each other before. We force them to sit down at a table or suggest to them that they sit on a table. We help them understand each other because they have different languages. They don't understand each other. They don't know what they're coming from. They don't understand their entry points. So we help them translate, and we help them take the decisions together to bring about the solutions that are needed. Remember that if there's one community on the planet today, but this has been true for a while, that has been able to collaborate across geographical lines, across political divisions, it's a science community. And this is certainly true during COVID as well. We have seen absolutely extraordinary things happening. The fact that we have several vaccines in less than a year is completely unheard of. And it's because people have been working together across the globe, and also because technology has moved so fast, so quickly, that it has been able to do so. So by putting these two communities together with other people as well as we move forward in the process of coming to these solutions, we hope that we will also achieve a second goal, which is to provide a practical proof of concept for a new multilateral approach. We are going to prove, if we're successful, that by working together, we can, in ways that we have never done before, we can achieve greater impact, better solutions, and help a much greater number of people across the globe to not be left behind, as is our very clear goal. And we are going to have to do that in making sure that the ethical aspects, the human rights aspects are the right thread that goes through everything we do. We don't want to create Frankensteins. We want to make sure that there is global acceptance for what we want to do. And that includes, as I said, both the two communities, but also other people. And we are going to be reaching out. We are putting in place structures to reach out to the public around the world so that they can have an opportunity to comment on what we do, to artists, to philosophers, to social scientists, to people from all walks of life, depending on which of the different technologies we're looking at. As I said, we're just starting. We're having a first meeting of the diplomacy crowd and the science crowd in 2 weeks to have the first conversation on how we're going to go about doing that and getting them to know each other. And it's rather exciting. And I have to tell you, I'm having enormous fun with this because it's such a quite extraordinary initiative that everybody thinks is cool. It's quite extraordinary. The scientists think it's great because they're suddenly presented with a funnel through which they can push their research and outcomes, a practical solution that will have an impact on people's lives. The organizations, NGOs and UN and others are delighted because it accelerates their access to new technologies, excuse me, to new technologies. The states are delighted because this will impact and benefit their citizens. And the private money and the philanthropic money is delighted because they think this is really cool and they want to invest in it. We're not taking money from governments for the time being to retain our neutrality and our ability to work without pressure. The only government that has given us money is Switzerland because they're the founding fathers, if you want, but they just gave us seed money and the rest is financed by donations. So this is an example of the new kinds of multilateralism that we're looking at and that we're working at. It's not a big one, but hopefully it's going to be having a big impact down the road. Let me close here by again asking you a question, actually, each one of you. And I've read a little bit what you're doing, and I must say I'm quite impressed by your activities and by your engagement. But the question to all of you and all your friends and family and young people is, what do you do, and what are you going to do to make sure that our that our planet is going to be a sustainable place to live for the years to come? We are in an awful hurry. If we don't get our act together really fast, it's going to be touch and go. So over to you three. Thank you, Jean-François.
Thank you very much, Michael. And you know, when we prepared the conference with Vedant, Charlotte, and Barwani, they asked me, what do we have to prepare as question? And I said to them, be careful, because maybe you will not address question to Michael, but he will address question to you. Then thank you very much. I just want to welcome everybody. We have more than 60 people participating to the conference today, and I saw many friends for many years and many people from many different countries. Then I will not meet all of you, but thank you very much for being with us. And before giving the floor to the three young students, I want to remember you that if you have any question to address to Michael or to the students, you can use the Q&A, the Q&R on your screen to ask questions that we will have at the end of the foundation. And I saw that some of you already sent those questions. Then I let the floor now to Vedant, to Charlotte, and to Barwani to introduce yourself very quickly and to answer to the Michael question. Please go on. Who starts? Barwani?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Barwani, you can go first. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jean-François. And those are some really insightful points, Mr. Møller. So just to sort of give my background, my name is Vedant Batra, and I grew up in India. I went to the States for my college. I've sort of always had this passion for blurring the lines between social impact and finance, and particularly with a focus on health, because I feel health is like one of those essential poverty traps that exist around the world, and it's very important for any country if they want to improve the quality of their human capital to focus on improving health outcomes. So I finished my college. Since then, I've had experience in impact investing, where I was working for a year, and most recently I've worked with the Health Innovation Exchange as part of UNAIDS, which has been a very sort of eye-opening and insightful experience, because it sort of translates very well to what Mr. Møller was saying, in the sense that we need a neutral facilitator that brings together different stakeholders, from governments to your accelerators to investors, and brings them on the same table and synergizes their different outcomes to essentially innovate. So it's been a very fascinating journey to see how different perspectives come up from different parts of the world and also from different sectors. And I think this is definitely like one of the ways that the world can, sort of accelerate innovation, because you take into account different perspectives that we haven't been doing, until recently. Thank you.
Did you say that you were working with IDER?
With Health Innovation Exchange as part of UNAIDS, yeah.
Because one of the with UNAIDS, yes, okay. No, because one of the things that we've been doing that I didn't mention is incubate a standalone that you might be interested in initiative that is now up and running called IDER. It's an international research collective that will look at how to use artificial intelligence in the health sector.
That's fascinating. I think it's sort of similar, and that definitely sounds very interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that.
All right, and it's headed by a compatriot of yours, Ambassador Amandeep Gill.
Well, I think I've heard of that.
Go on with it.
No, I think I've heard of that. I think it operates in the University of Geneva.
No, the Graduate Institute.
The Graduate Institute, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, but we're partners.
Michael, the Health Innovation Exchange is a partner that we have now for several years with Ahimsa, which is led by Pradeep Kakatil, and Pradeep is participating to the call today. And it's an innovation which has been launched by UNAIDS, working and trying to support and to give some advice to biotech companies in the field of new technologies in the field of global health. and they were also participating to the last forum. Charlotte, you want to take the floor from Canada?
Yes, of course. So my name is Charlotte. I grew up, or I'm Canadian, but I grew up internationally, moving around quite a bit with parents who worked in and out of the UN as well. But I currently live in and work amongst people in the Chief Dry Geese Territory in Treaty 8, the traditional territory of Yellowknife's Dene First Nation, also known as Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. And I'm currently working, or I guess my background, I'm 2 years out of university, majored in geography, have always had a really great interest in, or I guess throughout my undergraduate degree, looked at issues such as mental health and access to mental health services, and looking at inequities across the globe, but also within countries to access to mental health care. Currently, I'm a research assistant at a patient-oriented research institute called Hotik Seda in Yellowknife. And yeah, I guess areas of passion for me are kind of generating new knowledge for global health systems from kind of local community-based insight and experience. I think that as a young person, that's where I see a great gap is, yes, we have these kind of global converging, as you mentioned, the local and global are coming together. And, that presents opportunity, but also risks of, I guess, homogenizing narratives. And so that's something I'm very passionate about, and something that I've, had the opportunity, in Yellowknife to learn from its indigenous communities and, the depth of knowledge they have. And that's hopefully something I wish to, bring to the global conversation.
Especially in the health sector. I remember at one point in my career I was taking care of refugees, and I lived in the Yucatan, and the people I was dealing with them and we were sheltering were from Guatemala. And they brought, when they fled Guatemala, they brought with them their medicine men. And for the 2 years I was there, I never went to a doctor. I went to this fellow, and he cured me actually pretty much better than most doctors I'd been to before.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful experience, and they're really, I guess, voices that are, forging new pathways across the globe. And you've seen this, I think, particularly in recent years. But I think they're voices that we definitely need to help support, because they do, as you said, have incredible knowledge. And I think, when you talk about this new, building a new form of multilateralism, they're going to be key players, and they should be key players to that.
But also at another level, I think it's very important, and it's very pertinent to the question that this conversation is asking, how we learn from the COVID for the future. And certainly in the health sector, there's plenty of lessons I think that I've learned. You've touched on some of them, but the importance in getting ready for the next pandemic, for example, which we ought to have been ready for, because we knew it was happening and everybody was talking about it for years, and nobody was ready for anything. And it happens every time there's a pandemic, whether it's Ebola or SARS or anything else. It's rather frustrating, to put it very mildly. But the fact is that there are lessons to be learned and have been learned. They just have to be put into action. And part of them is precisely what you're working on and what you're touching on, which is the incredible power and reach of grassroots organizations and communities, where there is thousands of years of experience in how to treat people, using the nature to do so, that we have to bring up to the surface much more, and to rely on much more than we have so far. So yes, you're on a good path.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Then Barwani.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Barwani Msiska, and as introduced, I work in Malawi with Social Innovation in Health Initiative. I have a mixed background of having done some work in Malawi, but also worked within the healthcare system in the United States, and lived for a while in Kenya. So, and now I work across a couple of countries that work in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So that I think gives also a broader speak. but I would say I work at building bridges between social innovation and health systems with a true focus on healthcare delivery to really reach those who are the age. Because I think there, as you say, there's been a lot of things that have come out in recent times, but we've not really changed how we deliver care to those who need it most. And since 2018, I've been working at the University of Malawi College of Medicine to establish a platform in health, but advancing systems innovation in social innovation, and also leading multi-country research to make sure that we're building and catalyzing and testing novel innovations that our people themselves who are experiencing it are bringing to scale. And for me, I'm really passionate about locally different change that's transformative in nature, but also locally financed. Because these are things that I think help us to avoid the unintended consequences that a lot of global health, but also development well-natured ideas always do. And from somebody who is based in Malawi and has worked in different places, I see this all the time everywhere because we all work in silos. As such, even with the work that I do, I work with what we call a global network that's invested in advancing social innovation, which is called Social Innovation Health Initiative. But the idea of the network itself is in two things: to say, how do we go beyond the what of what we see in healthcare delivery, but all really look at the how. And when we look at that, the core questions that lead my work, but also our work, is to ask, to say, how do we get these tested and proven scientific and technology innovations to the people that need it? But also when you're doing it, how do we ensure that they're not passive recipients? And for me, like in my work, and I should applaud all the people who work, they do such an amazing work. They're actually showing us that the pipeline we've developed for development, for diplomacy is wrong, because they know better, but they're never truly there on the table, even if we celebrate their work, but they're never there when we have to make the decision that bring in the layered systems that interconnect and what we need to break. And the other thing is for us to say, how do we make sure that the role that low income and middle countries play in advancing this community engaged innovations or projects are really advanced and champion the leadership in a way that we create a pathway for universal health coverage, but also while extending primary health care, but also basic development. Because I think most times in these discussions, we tend to jump to the big idea and we forget the base that needs to become functional and really connected and working. So I think for me, it's always asking, how are we doing it and when and who is there? Because we can have this discussion again in a year, but we'll still be here because, as you said, we know what needs to be done. But maybe the biggest question is, why are we not doing it? Or if people who are doing it, how do we best support them? And I think in my work, the point is to bridge that gap and bring those forward and try to say, it's worked this way. Then why don't we invest in it better and leave what we've been trying to do?
I'm with you. I think I'm going to vote for you for next time there's a opening for the head of the WHO, because you sound like exactly what we're looking for. What you describe is precisely what I was talking about before, in the new kind of multilateral, the new kind of organizations that are networked, that are working together, that are collaborative, that have broken down their silos, and that leverage the knowledge, the local knowledge, into something that is much more impactful. So that's great. I encourage you to continue. That's fantastic. So, and all three of you, I mean, I must say, I don't know who chose you to come on this conversation, but I guess it's Jean-François, and he's made a fantastic choice of all.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Vedant, Charlotte, and Barwani. Do you have any additional information that you want to mention to Michael? What I want to maybe to underline is all those the three person Vedant mentioned that he worked with the Health Innovation Exchange. Charlotte is working with us on a fellowship project that we have with the Ahimsa project. And Barwani mentioned the CI, the CI initiative, social initiative in health initiative, and with which also Ahimsa is currently working. And really, what you said is the idea is to bridge those initiatives together and not to keep the idea working in silos. And I can assure you that the three of you, you are doing an amazing job and facilitating the connection with your organization. That's a great point. But Before going to giving the floor to the audience, and we have some question coming from the other participant, Vedant, Charlotte, and Barwani, do you have any additional point that you want to share with Michael?
Yeah, I think I have a question. This is particularly important because, so Michael, as you say that we need a new sort of perspective on multilateralism, and the world is sort of needs a more globalized structure in the sense that we need agencies that can like coordinate between different nations and like ensure that certain policies are like sort of standardized in this, and like certain mandates are being met. I think with the recent sort of like wave against globalization and the fact that the UN doesn't necessarily possess any enforcement powers, in the sense that they can keep on making laws, or in the sense that like vote on certain aspects, but if there are certain stakeholders or like nations that, particularly very important nations that have a lot of resources, that refuse to sort of toe the line, and how do you see the UN particularly like navigating through this and ensuring that there is an actual move towards globalization and not deglobalization? Because sorry, in the recent years, that's what's been happening.
You have to remember what the UN is. The UN is not a police force. It's a club made up of members who pay for membership and dues and expect that the organization follows the collective wisdom, if you want, or lack of its member states when it moves forward. It's a standard setter, it's a norm setter, and it should be, at least, and it is very often across the decades, through the person of the Secretary General, is more than the sum of its parts, in the sense that it has a moral voice that has, as I said also in the beginning, has helped make extraordinary changes. Now we're reaching now a time when it's no longer enough to rely, as we did in the past, on our governments, and therefore also on the organizations, different UN organizations, to do the job, to make the changes that are needed, and to make them stick. We are now in a world where technology has changed the way we understand, we learn about what's happening. We have access to practically every piece of knowledge almost instantly. All of us, almost all of us, have the possibility of expressing our voices through our cell phones and other electronic means. It's a very different environment and much more difficult to navigate. But it also it gives you and each one of us responsibility to use these properly, and to hold not only our leaders to account, but also ourselves and our communities and where we live. The best and freshest example of what I'm talking about is a way that a bunch of young people completely changed the discussion on climate in less than a couple of years. Greta Thunberg and her friends that spread the word and the movement across the planet have just done what a lot of reluctant governments were not willing to do, but have been forced to. I mean, the fact that the UK already last year, the year before, declared a climate emergency and has changed its budget and is moving on it, and others are doing it. The way that the fact that we had a report last week or the week before that based on the commitments that have been made so far, for the first time we heard the good news that by the end of the century we may be under 2% increase in the degrees. All of this kind of stuff is because the civil society, and particularly young people, have stood up and said enough is enough, and is putting pressure on the rest of us to get on with the job. And we need more of that. For example, I've just put up a group of very senior people to help us with the organization I was talking about, the GESDA. And one of the persons I've asked to join us is the Secretary General of the UN's Youth Envoy, because through her we get a network, we get access to an incredible network of youth organizations around the world that can make sure that we hear and we listen and we act on the voice of the youth globally. So I come back to what you were asking. Don't expect and don't think that this is either the UN or any other organization, or indeed your government or any agglomeration of governments, that on their own is going to police whatever decisions they have taken. It simply isn't going to happen. It will only happen if you push them into doing so. And we have proven time and time again that we can do it. We did it. It was done on human rights over the past couple of decades. It was done on climate. It was done on the environment. It's done. Let me give you a very specific example of something called the Ottawa Treaty, which was a treaty that banned landmines, that has killed millions of people over the last several decades, where governments were simply refusing to sign a treaty that would ban their use, their production, and their deployment. And one person, Jody Williams, got together and really herded public opinion across the globe into such a force that that treaty was signed and has now worked for the last 25 years and has saved untold number of lives. So it is possible, and it's going to be more and more possible as we move ahead. There are other actors, even in the political sphere. You know, what is happening today, and this is also a vector of influence or doors that you can walk through that maybe are easier than going to at the national level. But because of demography and because of the fact that over the next decades, the very vast majority of humanity is going to be living in cities, the importance of cities is growing every day. The importance of mayors is growing every day, and they have become, in many countries, a more powerful political force than the prime minister, if you want, or the president or whatever. And those are actually interesting actors on the global stage for the future, because this is where, as I said, most of us are going to be living, unless those cities have gone underwater in the meantime. But it's where citizens receive their services. It's where they get their education, it's where they get their food, it's where they get their health, it's where they get their transport, etc. So these urban structures are becoming more and more important, and more important actors in the way that we're going to decide on how to do how to manage our planet. I will give you an example. So I was part of the creation of a network of cities we call the SDG cities, and they were cities all over the world that decided. We started with 25. They decided to collaborate and to leverage each other's expertise and knowledge. And they were cities: Palo Alto, Abidjan, Bangkok. I mean, there were cities of all sizes, all regions. All of these cities went ahead and collaborated, leveraged each other's knowledge, implemented new programs, did fantastic things. Not a single one of these mayors referred back to the national governments. They just went on with their job. So we're seeing a transformation there as well. And these are easier, shall we say, actors, political actors to access than at the national government for folks like you and folks like me and folks like everybody. And those are the new partners, if you want, in getting things done. You need to help communities or to offer certain parts of communities assistance in getting something done. This is where it happens. One example is one of the cities I worked with very closely in creating this was the city of Heidelberg in Germany, mid-sized city. He put in place a really very simple system of interaction with his citizens. He told them, if you have a good idea, find another 10 people who support your idea, put it on paper, send it to me. If I think it makes sense, I'll come and visit you personally. And if we can agree, I will finance it, and we'll get on, and you will get on with it. It was an incredible success. So all of a sudden, his city is now a complete. It has strengthened the unity between the leaders and the citizens in dealing with the daily needs of the city itself, and they are doing fantastic things there. So there's plenty of innovation. There's plenty of innovative things. Many of them rooted in the SDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals. And each one of you can participate and can come up with your good ideas. I often speak to, often is maybe an exaggeration, but I sometimes speak to youth groups like One Young World and at the WEF, all of them collections of social entrepreneurs, many of them your age or younger, incredible energy, incredible ideas, doing stuff and just getting on with it, whether it's in the environment, whether it's in climate mitigation measures, whether it's in the health sector, whether it's in the educational sector. But there's an army out there, people like you, that are doing stuff. We need to connect the dots a little bit better, and we're in the process of doing that, all of us. But stuff is happening. That is positive.
Thank you very much, Michael. And what I propose is I will take. We have many questions from the audience, from participants, I want to propose you, Michael, to give you 2 or 3 questions to try on your side to answer. Then the first one is a question coming from someone I met many years ago in New York, is Tinatin.
No, Tinatin.
Tinatin Geoparadise. And Tinatin asked the question to say, how do we balance in the world today the great things that we see on the field and the great people we see during that conference, and all this information campaign that we have on another side? We have another question from Monique.
Wait a minute, did I get this straight? How do we balance all the good stuff with all of some of the bad stuff we're seeing?
Exactly. The second question comes from Monique. Monique Lang is based in Atlanta in the US, and she is working for Peace Park Foundation. And Monique speak about the compassionate leadership. Do we see, or do we start to see any new leadership appearing due to the COVID-19 situation? And another question from Monique is, how individually could we be involved in all those projects, and what are Mr. Møller needs? We have another point that I want to mention, which comes from my friend Jean-Luc Pierron. Jean-Luc is working with Professor Yunus, the Peace Nobel Prize, and they launched an initiative on, which is called the COVID-19 vaccine, a global common good. And the idea is to see how could we make those vaccines available and accessible to those emerging population. And there is a huge, there is a lot of initiative, and we hope that we are going to succeed. But any advice or suggestion that you can make would be appreciated. I give you back the floor, Michael.
Yeah. Okay. So Tinatin, hi. How are you? I hadn't seen you for a long time, so nice to hear that you are online. So how do we counteract the fake news, the really pretty crazy stuff that we're seeing on social media, and etc. And with the good, I think it's a harder question to answer, and it's a question that a lot of people are working on right now. I don't really know if I have the answer. I think that there has to be, on the one hand, and we're beginning to see it now, much greater consequences to the big tech companies that are blithely allowing all of this to happening in spite of their expressions of good intentions, and not really taking robust actions against people who are spewing hate and falsehoods across the ether. So that has to be reinforced. I think that one of the ways of reinforcing it is to raise your voices to your elected officials, to your governments, through the media, through your own social media, and learning together with those who know how to do it best to come up with messages that go viral. One of the problems we have today, which is also something you can use, is that the decision-making process by our leaders and by a lot of people has shrunk to nanoseconds, because they have to reflect, they have to react to tweets within seconds. They don't have time to reflect and to think and to ponder and to get some advice, etc. But at the same time, it's also a tool to really put pressure and to bring up to the fore and to the surface some of these really existential problems that we need to deal with. If we don't, we are going to have increasingly a problem. That is clear. We cannot at the same time claim, as I do, that we need to figure out better ways of working together if we want to solve the existential problems of today, whether they're climate or refugees or migration or corruption or whatever they are, and at the same time allow disruptive voices who have whatever reasons that are not well-intentioned, are trying to torpedo some of these things. Certainly not just individuals, but I'm also clearly mindful of what certain states are doing in disrupting the social fabric of some of their opponents in terms of countries. So I think that there's a personal responsibility that plays in here as well, where we have to be part of a wave that pushes those who have the ability to make decisions and to take actions to rectify this. And at the same time, also, I think, use the same means to highlight and to underline and to bring up to the surface good examples and examples of good actions, of good initiatives, of out-of-the-box thinking, of good results, of things that are being done at the community level that can be replicated elsewhere, good examples of forward movement, etc. So the individual responsibility level here is quite fertile, and there's a ground for a lot of stuff can happen, and it's not that difficult these days to really make things move. You know, for example, using TikTok, for example, instead of just standing there and dancing, maybe do it pass a message in a smart way that will make some of these young people who are watching it think about the environment they're in, about the future, about how they behave themselves, about how they can be part of the solution, rather than just being sort of bystanders that are not really thinking through their own actions. So that's one. I don't know if I answered your question, Tinatin, but it's part of my answer. Compassionate leadership. Yes, we are seeing compassionate leadership, but it depends. It depends a little bit about what you're talking about in terms of leadership. Is it political leadership? Is it leadership in your community? Is it leadership at schools? Is it leadership at universities? Is it leadership in cities, etc.? There are many levels of leadership in business, in the business community. We're seeing more and more, for example, in industry and in the business community, that the next generation of leaders of companies, big and small, have to a much larger extent than those that came before them, acquired a social conscience and are really understanding more and more that they have to be part of the solution. They cannot operate in a community, sell their wares, sell their goods, do whatever it is they're doing in their business without having a very serious thought and incorporating into their tactics, into their business model, the well-being of the communities in which they're operating. We're seeing that a lot more now, and obviously it's an interesting development that has happened over the past couple of years, because it's becoming more and more clear that unless, and this is true for multinationals as well, unless you are a sustainable business, unless you are a green business, unless you are a business that behaves itself as a good corporate citizen, unless you adhere to human rights norms and you behave in the communities in which you work, three things are going to happen, which they pay attention to, which is: one, you're not going to work for that company; two, you're not going to buy their goods or their services; and three, you're not going to invest in them. So the moment you start hitting the money line, then action usually follows. When companies understand that it's the very survival of their business that depends on them living and working and acting the right way. So yes, you are going to see more compassionate leadership on that side. And also more, and it goes hand in hand with what I said at the very beginning, which is that a lot of these leaders, heads of companies, big industrialists, are going to be part of the decision-making process in terms of how we're going to be managing our property. They are already, but not in a formal way. But they're going to have to step up to the front line and be seen as responsible, instead of just playing behind the walls and behind the backs of people, as they've done for many hundreds of years. And the same is true with civil society, which in many cases, by definition, is more compassionate than political leadership, and whose voice and role is going to be heard more and more. So there is going to be a transmission or transfer of compassion injected into the way that we are going to take decisions, and the kind of concerns that are going to be at the basis of the way we take decisions, etc. So I think, yes, the answer, I think, is there is going to be more compassion. It's very clearly today, many leaders are exactly the opposite. Some of the things that we're seeing in some countries is absolutely appalling, both in terms of the way they deal with their citizens, killing them and completely disregarding their human rights, and in terms of the way that they govern and the way that they put down dissent physically and violently. But at the end of the day, those are in the minority. In today's world, we are going to see I hope, over the next decade, a return not just to compassionate leadership, but also to democratic leadership. Because I believe that unless we do so, and unless we do so in this collaborative way, we are simply not going to survive. And our race is going to disappear, and somebody else will come after us one day. But we have a responsibility to build something that is based on compassion and the values, a value system that we all have to agree on. It may not be exactly the same values on which we have built our world for the past 70 years, but certainly we have to have an agreement on how we move forward and on which values and on which basis we're going to take decisions, collective decisions. I think that one of the things that is interesting in this is to think about is the fact that for the last several hundred years, the Western philosophy has prevailed as a basis for the way that we govern ourselves, where the rights of the individual very much are central. And what we're looking at is a move more towards the Asian model, more and more, where the rights of the community is central, and where it's simply, we can no longer afford to have a system and to live in a way where every single individual on the planet does whatever he or she wants, because it's simply not sustainable anymore. We have messed with the planet in such a way that we have to rectify that, and we have to give preference and priority to the well-being and the needs of the community over the well-being and the needs of the individual. So that is a change we're living as well. And of course, with that comes a whole series of other problems, but the element of compassion is very much at the center of that, and will have to be, because those changes are going to be wrenching for some people. We're going to have to help them get through it and adapt to it. So how can we individually be involved? Well, I just mentioned several ways of where you can be involved individually. I mean, I think activism is at all levels of our lives, all levels of our societies, and it starts pretty much from the time where you can walk and talk. So I would say around 4 or 5 years old, you and your siblings and your children should start being active in your communities, and some of them are already. Now, in terms of what you can do for me, there's not much. Well, I'm sure there's plenty you can do for me, but I'd rather point you to a number of areas in which I'm active. I'm on the board of the Kofi Annan Foundation, which is doing some quite interesting things also for young people. And there are, if you go to the website, kofiannanfoundation.org, then you will see some of the activities that the foundation is involved with, including with youth. One very interesting initiative is called Extremely Together, where the foundation is helping young people in really difficult countries to counter extremism and violent extremism. It has quite a lot of success. It has done wonderful things. 2 of the young women, one from I think Libya and the other from South Sudan or something, or Somalia, last year were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for the work they're doing. So they're getting some really cool third-party validation. And there's some interesting things to be done there. We're also working a lot on the integrity of elections in a digital age, helping countries have elections that are not being hampered with, and how to counter that, and how to make sure that that the elections are done in a correct way. There's a lot of work on peace in different contexts, and particularly in countries where we're helping governments and civil society manage the transition from war and from internal war to a peaceful transformation of their societies. A lot of interesting things there. Have a look and write to them. They're more than ready to have you participate in their work, and they do things all over the planet. On the issue, the GESDA thing, it's still in a startup phase. We're not quite there yet where we can or are ready to bring in assistance from outside, but at some point we will, and we'll need interns, and we'll need people around. One of the things that we're looking at, having seen the interest of governments in what we're doing, and the questions very often come very early on in the conversation, said, how can we get one of those in our country? How can we get a GESDA in our country? And so one of the things that we will be working on next year is to create a kind of a GESDA in a box that we can give to a government or to interested parties in a country to set up an institution, an institute, or a facility where scientists in the country can come together with the leaders and other other members of society to discuss on how they can translate their science into the most appropriate tools for those who are in the field helping people get a better life. There you are.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your time, those inspiring reflection that you share with us. And, unfortunately, we will have to close the session now, but why not to move forward and to in this reflection and to organize some next session during the next conferences of Ahimsa Renaissance Movement. What I want to really is to thank you personally, Michael, for being with us today and sharing with on an inspiring way your feeling and your thoughts on this issue. I think that it will bring a little bit optimism to us, and we need that optimism, each of you. Then thank you very much. I want also to thank you very much, Vedant, Charlotte, and Barwani, for being with us, sharing your experience, and being part of this new dynamism that we need to have also to make it move. And be sure that we need to associate what I say many times, the wisdom of the experience of people like us with the dynamism of youth, with people like you. And we are at Ahimsa level very, very happy to cope with you. Michael, please.
Yeah, I just want to leave you with a quote from my old boss, Kofi Annan, which I love using, and which you may have heard before, where he said, "You're never too young to lead, and you're never too old to learn."
Yeah, thank you. Then that's the conclusion. Then thank you again, all of you. Thank you to all the participants. As I mentioned to you, we are going then to organize on a regular basis every 2 months this kind of conference. The next one is already scheduled for the 2nd of February at 2 p.m. French time, CET time, and it will be around COVID-19 and faith-inspired communities. You know that we are working very closely with religious communities all over the world. Then we are going to have a session on COVID-19 and faith-inspired communities, February the 2nd at 2 p.m. CET time. The guest speaker is going to be Catherine Marshall, and thank you very much, Catherine. And I know that you are participating to the conference, and we will have 3 testimonies, one from a Buddhist community based in Sri Lanka, a second one more Muslim community based in Indonesia, and a Christian communities based in Africa, in Ghana. Then February the 2nd at 2 p.m. we will send you, of course, the information. I want once again to thank you all for your contribution, your participation. We wish personally to a lot of care, to take care of yourself, to take care of your family in this period of life. And we want, under the Ahimsa name, to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas to you and to your family. Thank you very much, and let's keep in touch and see you soon.